Hello and welcome everybody. It is Suzanne here with a very special, kind of like exciting, weird way to announce a book. And I appreciate you all being here tonight. Due to the situation with COVID and everything, social distancing, etc., it's been pretty difficult to launch my new book. And we decided instead that it would be kind of fun to take the concept of the book and actually just bring it forward and open it up to everybody out there in terms of questions and kind of like wrap it into a webinar or a webcast or a book launch all at the same time. So I really, really appreciate you being here tonight. And I do want to just show you the book cover. It is very exciting for me. It's, like I said, kind of a really strange juxtaposition to announce a book on death and dying during a pandemic, for God's sakes. But in my opinion, truly, there is no better time to actually announce this book. So before we get started, I just want to say this is kind of a tough subject for people. And as I say in almost everything that I do, please only take what resonates and toss the rest, especially when it comes to belief systems, not only about source energy, but about death and dying and our loved ones. So I have a very different perspective on this because of my life, and we'll get into that in a second. But I just want to say I am here to present this information and do my best to assist others in answering some questions. So before we even get into that, I do want to say a very brief thank you to the people that helped do this book. I would not even have been able to actually write this book if it weren't for people like Kelsey, who all of you that are Vibe Tribe members and ongoing listeners, you know Kelsey, and she's the backbone to all of the stuff that I do on the web. And I appreciate her so much, and I appreciate her work and her input and her editing. Annie Wilder is my literary agent and the agent for this book. Hopefully she's on here tonight too. I'm not so sure, but thank you to Annie. Without her, it would not have been possible at all. Her time and her talents and her insight. And Tracy Loeffler is also another person that helped edit. Without Tracy's last minute things, she fine-tooth combed the whole entire thing and made it just a breeze for our then publisher and publishing house, which is Finhorn Press and Inner Traditions. And they were super excited to work with us, as were we them, in terms of the manuscript came so clean because of all of the help. So thank you to all of you people that have supported it in terms of getting it into actual print. And I also really appreciate any of you out there that have actually purchased the book. I don't know, too much about how you're getting it. It's on my website. It's everywhere. It's on my website. It's on Amazon. It's on, Barnes & Noble. All you have to do is actually Google An Energy Healer's Book of Dying and or me, and you can jump on and grab one if you choose to. I wrote this book not to write a book. First and foremost, for people that might not know me, I am an energy practitioner. I'm a healer and I do a lot of death and dying work. But even prior to that, I'm a mortician's daughter, and death and dying was very normal for me. And growing up in around the concept of death, whatever your dad did for work and you talked about at the dinner table, that's what my dad did for work and we talked about at the dinner table. And so for me, this concept of we leave planet isn't a big surprise and never was. And I grew up running around a funeral home on Saturday afternoon because that's where we took piano lessons across the street. And so for me, this concept of, funerals or wakes or celebrations of life or people coming in and saying goodbye to their loved ones, this was all a really normal thing. And it was only until maybe junior high when I started to realize that not everybody thought about death the same way that I did. And so when I got into the later years, I was always pretty okay with this whole thing and didn't talk a whole lot about it, but was always kind of in awe that others did not find that this was a natural and normal experience. And so as I progressed into the years later, becoming an energy practitioner and healer, moving into hospice was just a natural evolution. And so going into the hospice work for me was only sharing further my knowledge and my acceptance that we have an honor to offer when someone is choosing to die. And again, I have different belief systems, and please try, if you choose, to open up and expand your heart to some of these words or these thought processes during this webcast, because there's different ways to look at this. And my goal is to share some different perspectives and to mostly answer questions. Now, when we initially scheduled this, I only put it out for an hour because I didn't really have a whole lot of questions at that time. And since then, they've been pouring in, which is awesome. Thank you very much. And I am going to do my best to kind of see and gauge the actual ability to keep going. Can go over an hour. And if I feel like we're rolling and we're still got some answers, I may keep going. You can choose to obviously leave at any time. It will be archived and we will stick it up on the website later if you choose to leave at any point in time. But I'm going to try to honor the fact of the questions that came in at this point in time. And if indeed this does go well and we find ourselves with lots more questions, then we may indeed do another one of these and possibly more as we go on. We are also in the midst of starting well, we already did, thanks to Kelsey, a YouTube channel under my name, Suzanne Worthley or S. Worthley. You can look it up too. And this is in response to these questions. They're very short little YouTube blurbs on different questions, not ones we're counting on tonight or talking about tonight. But you might want to check that out for some further information down the road here. So as far as tonight goes, I am going to reference the ones that have been put forward already. But as we're progressing, if this piques an actual question for you or a confusion for you that you would like further clarification on, please feel free to write that on the sidebar, because Kelsey, thank you, by the way, is on board with us and kind of like streaming along and grabbing those questions and actually putting those aside so that we can get back to that later. And I really appreciate that, so that we can make sure that we satisfy everyone's curiosities and or more so help with anything that is fear-filled for you. And that basically is why I wrote this book. I wrote this book only because when I was in the initial stages of being a hospice worker, I was very curious of what was going on in their minds and in their hearts as they were dying. I was called, and still am called, an end of life hospice worker, meaning I only come in at the end of the life because of the fact that I choose to help them transition and cross over. There's nothing that Suzanne does to actually make somebody die. They are going to die and they are in that process. But my goal as an energy practitioner is to actually bring forward a smoother transition and to help that process along. And as I was asking questions for many years throughout hospice, I was actually jotting down their answers. I would telepathically ask questions to them and I would jot down their answers, which then I started to bring forward in hospice volunteer meetings and share with one another, with the other volunteers, because I thought it was really cool stuff. Well, that led to them asking me to please put together like a PowerPoint presentation and share. And then that led to training. And then that led to more of an ebook. And then that led to, thanks to everybody I mentioned, a real life book. And so here we are now at the point of, this is a resource tool. This is written in response to how these people have transitioned. There's actual case studies throughout the entire book that are real case studies that I did do, and they're fascinating and fabulous, and you can learn from them. Additionally, I go through 9 what I call stages of dying. And how this works basically, and I'm not going to go, oh, I'm cutting out, it says. I'm cutting out. Does everybody think I'm cutting out, or is it just her? Can somebody let me know if I'm okay? Because it could be her end. Anybody else? Am I stuck? Can somebody come on the sidebar and let me know if I'm still coming through okay, and if it's just cutting out for Tamara? Yes, it is. No, good here. Okay, so it is good. Good. Okay, good. I'm going to keep going. So Tamara, you or Tamara or whatever, you got to kind of go back in and go out again. Okay. So look along the side. That's great. Okay. So I think my internet has been a little strange lately. I think most of you are saying it sounds pretty good. So I'm going to keep going. Basically, what I outline in the book is, when we are talking in terms of energy, we ignite our chakra system and our auric fields in utero. We methodically ignite them month by month by month in utero. And so when we are walking around as a meat and bone body here on the earth every day, we are fueled by our God source energy, by our chakra system. And I'm not going to get into a ton of that because there's tons of information on my website about that and lots of other places, including the book. But basically, when we're walking around, we are a human body, okay? And we have 7 different chakra points and or fuel destination points that fuel the way that we live. And there are 3 on the bottom that are our physical chakras. There are 3 on the top that are our spiritual chakras. And the 7th one is the bridge in the heart area. And so these get activated month by month during the pregnancy period, starting in month 3. And it goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way until birth. And they activate starting with the crown chakra each month, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this is 9th month. And this is why we want to go full term if we can, because then that root chakra is activated and we're connected to the earth energy. When we are in the death process, if we are teaching it in a methodical way, we de-ignite the opposite way. We first release our root chakra and then we go through the processes thereof and lastly release our crown chakra, which brings us back to source energy. So this is basically a return to source. That's what death is. It is coming from that God source. We embody, we have a meat body experience, and we ignite to get here, and we de-ignite to go back to source energy. This is written in the book in a very methodical way so that you can see the processes, and that if you're a caregiver, for example, and somebody in hospice or in a situation of long-term health care or in the hospital, you will be able to track a lot of the actual physical and emotional, mental things going on for that patient and or loved one in the bed per the book. And additionally, I write it with the perspective of an energy practitioner who is an intuitive, meaning I tell you what I intuitively see. And not everybody has their psychic gifts activated. That doesn't judge anybody. It's just that if you don't have that ability, you're missing some amazing, beautiful, wonderful, benevolent help coming in terms of energy and angels and loved ones. And I specifically write this out in the book so that if you don't have those psychic skills, you at least know that your loved one is experiencing this. And that can really, really help in the process of fear along the way. My goal with this book is to alleviate fear by giving knowledge. And I think this is so important because when we're in the death process, we're usually so scared and we're terrified to even get to the death process, much less sit with someone who we're losing. And so I think this is really an important part of the book, that it is written in terms of what a psychic intuitive hears telepathically and sees with psychic sight. And this is it's an exceptional way to present this information, and very, very different. The other part that I want to say about this book before we get to questions is, yes, it is a book about death and dying, but it is also a book about living. And I've been doing several interviews throughout this process, as many as I can, during when everything shut down. But the ones that I've been chatting with, they say, what would you like to mostly tell people at the end of the interview? And I say, I would like people to know that, yes, this is a book about death and dying, but more so it's about living. Because these chakra centers are already in transition for every single one of us on this webcast tonight and every single one of us walking this planet. The minute we come into this meat body, we are absolutely changing this meat and bone existence on an emotional, mental, and especially physical way because of how these chakras run and how much gasoline is there and how much stagnant energy is within us, etc. Dis-ease turns to disease, and we die according to choices that happen in our chakra system. So this book is actually a health book for those that are living and alive as much as it's a help tool to those who are dying and transitioning. So I really encourage people, no matter what your situation is, to consider buying the book to just learn about what this meat and bone body is doing in terms of existence. And then also for someone that may have lost someone even years ago, amazingly, we can go back and go, gosh, I always thought I made that up, or I thought it was crazy, or I thought I just wanted to think that. So it doesn't matter how long ago we've lost a loved one. This book can help definitely heal those situations. So let's get to the questions. These are going to be all over the board because they were in a lot of different areas, and I didn't want to script this at all. I wanted this to be very organic and very generic. So the very first thing that people ask me before we get into the questions, though, is how is it that you get this information? How do you even know this stuff? And as I said a moment ago, being an intuitive, being someone with psychic skills, and I do have a lot of different kinds of clairs, meaning I am clairaudient, meaning I can hear them talk. I am clairvoyant, meaning I can see things. I am claircognizant, meaning I just know things. And I am definitely clairsentient. I can feel things, and I can even smell things. I can taste things. So I pretty much have all of the clairs. But when I'm doing this work, I am mostly doing it in terms of my clairsentience, meaning my feel center, but almost all of it is my clairaudient when I'm talking with someone who is dying and or conversing with someone who has already died. And the way that works really quickly, I want to use the whiteboard again for one quick second. When I am a meat body and I'm walking around, I connect to my so-called soul, my oversoul, my higher self, my soul. We are all a soul. And when we are down here, we hold a piece of that soul. We are an expression of that soul. We are a shard of that God essence. And we choose, by the way, to come down here. We choose to come down here in terms of essence and consciousness. There is a actual sperm and egg, yeah, because we got to have the container, but that choice of consciousness, my soul choosing to come in, happens during this igniting of the chakras in utero. So we choose, and this soul is part of our choice. And the soul up here has had many different lifetimes, and I'm going to draw them like little spokes out here on a sunshine. When I am in my current incarnation, when I have chose to come in as Suzanne, I am still connected to my oversoul or my higher self, my soul self, my God self, with what is called sometimes a silver cord. It is an actual energy cord that goes from my higher self and it connects into my heart chakra, and it drives the whole plan of action, book of life, Akashic record, all of those interchangeable words, which I explain in the book, by the way. My book of life, my reasons for being here, are my lesson plan. It holds all of that energetic information. So when I die, this actually, when these shut down and release, this cord eventually starts to release, and it goes back to my soul energy. And forever, even though this is gone now, this individualized tentacle is forever a Suzanne essence with consciousness. So this is how I talk to people that are dead, as well as I talk to people who are dying, because they are still in this process. So dead is when they go back fully and I can access them in that tentacle. In death or in transition is in this area. And this happens as well, by the way, when you are fully fine and you're just having a healing, for example. I work in this area no matter. So this is important for us to know, because we come in with a plan and we come in with all kinds of information. And yes, we come in with the exit plan. And is that in concrete? No. We oftentimes have more than one exit plan, well, more than one date, more than one option. And we usually stick to that primary one, but there's reasons that we may change that along the way. But what I wanted to say about that is people ask me, how do I access that? So this is how I access it, with telepathy, using heart and mind of a higher vibration. I like finds like, meaning that vibration finds my vibration, and we actually converse on this level. So this is a really important way to understand that we don't make this stuff up. And it's very, very, not that I have to validate any of my work, but it has been validated time and time again by, I will be sitting in a hospice room and I'll say, gosh, this person's telling me that their husband is here and their name is Ron. And I don't know Ron, and I don't even know their file. And sure enough, their husband is Ron, who has passed away years ago. So it is a very real kind of connection to spirit. And this is the way usually a medium or a psychic person gets that information. So the most often question, the most asked question, the most often I get is, are they okay? Is my loved one okay? And this is really very typical, because we get scared. We don't know for sure what anything is, because we haven't done it. We haven't experienced it. We don't know where they go and if they are okay. So this is a really kind of relative and open-ended question, because okay means a lot of things to a lot of people. What I am here to tell you is, this is similar to when we are alive. I really need to understand, even when I'm alive, that anybody in my life, anybody that I love, my child, my parent, my partner, my friend, my sister, whatever, I need to understand that that person is okay, even when they're alive and well. I do not need to worry about another being. And we choose to do this all the time as humans because we jump into each other's business all the time, especially in terms of energy. We are always taken care of. We are always guided. We are always connected to our angels, our guardian angel for sure, our loved ones, our totems. All of this energy is always with us every single day of our life when we are walking around a meat body as existing alive. So does that change anything when we're dead? Absolutely not. In fact, when we are so-called dead now, and we have left this body existence and we go back and transition to source, through that process, not only do I have all of that benevolent help I've already had, but now my consciousness is open to all of those loved ones that I have lost prior in all kinds of lives. I go home. That's why we use the word going home. I go home to a place that, yes, of course I am okay. Now, at the very same time, I want to clarify something. We don't just go back and run around on rainbows and jump on unicorns and play with butterflies. We go home and we still do work. And this brings us right to my next question, because oftentimes when I work with people and their loved ones, I say, well, your loved one is fine and everything's going on over there, but they're still working. They're still working. And they will say, what does still working mean, Suzanne? I don't understand what that means. So now remember, when I chose to come in and I had my book of life coming in through the silver cord, and I chose to have lessons of all kinds of things. I chose this in between lives. I chose possibly lessons on abandonment, or maybe poverty consciousness, or maybe body issues, or maybe abuse. I chose all kinds of lessons. And if I did not necessarily do what I came here to do fully, and I leave planet in meat body form, and I go back to source energy or heaven or whatever words you want to use for your belief systems, I still may have work to do to accomplish that so-called book of life lesson plan. And that work to do is assisted, again, by these benevolent beings, my guardian angels, my helpers on the other side. So it isn't technically like how we work here on 3D plane, but it is not that dissimilar, because I still get to, and it isn't I have to, it's I get to move forward to ascend my soul, to clean out fear, to come to full understanding, to find forgiveness and atonement. So I get to still do some work when I'm on that other side of the veil. So this confuses people sometimes when I say they still are working. And so that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. Why would we think that we're over there just twiddling thumbs? And again, a lot of us will say things like, oh, Dad's bowling now with his brother because they always like to drink beer and bowl. Great, awesome, beautiful imagery, fabulous imagery. And you know what? They might be bowling here and there, but at the very same time, they're working in terms of not only assisting the ascension of their own soul, but planetary systems, the earth itself, humanity as a whole, past, present, and future. I mean, we're not necessarily just sitting around bowling. We are working, but we're working in a different realm with a different kind of a body. So I hope that sort of helps for that kind of a question, because I know that that one confuses people a lot. So are they okay? Yes, they're okay. Does that mean sometimes they still have some things to work on, which would maybe tweak that okay? Sure. Okay. Another question. I've always wondered if the, as you put it, meat sack or human ego ever knows today is the day I die. Really cool question. I don't absolutely know that's for sure in terms of the day I die, but I do know for sure that I have worked with very many people that have had on both sides of the veil a knowing. First, the veil of the family that has lost the loved one. Very many times the family has had an indicator, has had a feeling, has had maybe that kind of knowing, but I don't want to think about that. And sure enough, it happens. And at the very same time, this person may have that feeling, knowing. So there is some action that then this person picks up, meaning I know that I'm leaving this earth plane as I go on this trip. I know that. So I actually say my goodbyes differently, or I have actions that are differently, or I articulate differently, or I set things up differently. And it's nothing about a suicide. It's just I know that this is going to come into play in my reality. So on a subconscious basis, I'm giving that message. So yes, I believe a lot of us know when we are going to die. I don't think it's a huge amount of percentage, but I do definitely know that I have encountered that and worked on both sides of the veil encountering that, if I made that clear. Can our loved ones in heaven pray for us? Oh my goodness, I thought that was a really interesting question, because that prayer, first and foremost, in my opinion, is energy. Energy for me is prayer, not this kind of prayer that we kind of automatically, verbally vomit out because we learned it in grade school. This is prayer is holding energy and space for people. It can be about forgiveness. It can be about love, blessings, atonement, all kinds of things. So if we pray for them, why wouldn't they be praying for us? And their jobs in a lot of embodiments, meaning we picked a meat and bone embodiment as a human. Other sources of God pick different embodiments, like an angel, for example. And angels that are in a form of an angelic instead of a meat body human, a lot of their job is to pray and to hold prayer and to receive prayer. So do they pray for us? Yeah, they do. But we need to understand that we also need to allow that. We need to ask for it. We need to connect to it. We need to know that we have that support system. And this is the word faith comes in here. We need to understand just because their choice to no longer be existing in a meat body is not the same, the consciousness is still there. So yes, my mother can pray for me if she's dead. Yes, my grandma is watching over me and knows I have grandchildren. So let's not ever forget, just because my loved one chose to leave in meat body form, they don't ever leave us. And this is part of the confusion for most people. And I'm going to jump right into that, because the question is where do they go and what happens when they actually die? What happens when we die is this body again shuts down in auric form. And this is how the book really methodically lays it out. So it's very, very clear in the book. And it's a super easy read, by the way. You might want to just read it to learn the process. But as each of these chakras shuts down, the chakra is like the gasoline for the actual vehicle. And each chakra has what we call an interpenetrating gas tank. So if a chakra shuts down, a gas tank disappears. And it keeps methodically working like that, so that I actually shut down, disappear, and we transmute back to full source. We transmute back to full energy. We started as energy, we came in and formulated, and we return to energy. So this is the word that we use when we get back. It's called omnipresence. It means I am all. I am the all. I am part of the all. I came from the all. I went into an individualized experience of egoic meat body so that I could really create. And I've always been connected to the all, even during that time period. And when this creation list is done, I go back to the all. So does that consciousness go anywhere? No, that consciousness to some shard will always be a Suzanne. One of these shards will always be a Suzanne. And when I go back to source energy, I'm very aware of all the other lifetimes that I've had. And we can even get to that, by the way, when we're a good meditator or an astral traveler, we can learn about past lives. So this is important for us to know. They're omnipresent. So yes, they can go back and forth at this point, because they're simply just energy, which is driven by intention and love. So they don't go anywhere. But are they hanging out in my room every day? No, because they are busy. And again, we're not hanging out on a rainbow. We are busy learning, making things happen, coming into new incarnations, doing the work on behalf of this planet and others, and et cetera, et cetera. So when we are busy, it's just like a human body. I don't not love my kid because I have to go to work. But if my kid calls, I'm on the phone or I'm there in person to pick up that kid because they want me and they need me. No different. When I am in no body form, I'm out doing my thing. So I'm not in your living room every single solitary day. But if there's a call out, meaning I miss you, I love you, or an actual articulation, I need you, the essence of energy, like finds like. And that's when we have these experiences that are sometimes wonderful and sometimes missed because we don't believe this. So it is about intention, and they go to omnipresence. So this is an important thing to trust in faith, because it is very, very real. So explain in depth what they get to means, because I say this a lot in the book. They get to die. A lot of people don't like me saying that, but I'm telling you, this is important. If you hear one message, please understand this. We get to die. And it doesn't seem to a lot of us down here on the third dimensional plane that people want to die. Well, of course we don't. We don't even understand what this process is about. And that's why I'm doing these videos and doing this book. I would like people to entertain the concept of, we know from a higher perspective exactly why I came down here and what I'm creating. And we also know from a higher perspective when my job here is done. And I also, from a higher perspective, have the right to go have other creations. I have the right to go have other experiences. I have the right to go back to God's source. But when we look at it from the third dimension, we that are left are taking that on to our own personal container and saying, yeah, but I want him here. I want him here. So when I say they get to, this is a word that is so important. Honor. Honor the fact that they get to die. And they may not even know that, by the way, in the 3D experience. They may be suffering with cancer. They may be having a horrible car crash. All these things don't make sense in our brains down here. But from that higher perspective, please understand they get to die, because their choice from the soul has done the things they came here to do, and they have other things to do. And we have to get this through our heads in order to alleviate all of this personalized fear and taking responsibility away from that honor. We get to die. And so if we can learn to honor that, we can understand they didn't leave me. They didn't abandon me. They didn't go before they were a mother and or a grandmother or got the job or bought the house. They left because they chose to, because they get to. So it really puts a different spin on this whole entire subject if you can start to get your head around the honor and they get to. So that's a tough one for a lot of people. And again, if this doesn't resonate for you, it's fine. It's just that it's very, very in my life, in my career, in my knowing, in my upbringing, the entire concept of honoring this has been so critical. And that's what drives me to help people understand, if you choose. What does someone feel when they die? Well, this depends on their death experience. Now, this is a toughie because I got another one that said, if they have a horrific death, do I feel that? Do I remember that? So I'm going to kind of combine these two. Definitely, we feel all kinds of different things. We are shutting down these chakra systems all the time, by the way, throughout our life. So my goal as a human meat body walking around right now as Suzanne is to clear out anything that is fearful, because the more fear I carry in this body right now, the more difficult my death can possibly be, because I am going to have to move through that fear anyway. So we can help assist our death now by learning things that are in this book. For example, how to get rid of the fears of money or stuff or people or all of these things that we struggle with as humans every day. If we learn how to clean out our container now, we not only live a more healthy life, but we have a more ease-filled and graceful death in terms of a methodical death. So if I have a horrific death or a car accident or something awful happening that's very jarring, a lot of people ask me, well, then what happens then? Because you wrote the book in a methodical way. I wrote the book in a methodical way so that you can understand it. If I have a jarring, horrible, horrific accident, which sadly sometimes happens, then my body will be taken out of this container in a non-methodical way. But does that mean that I will retain that horror or that fear? Absolutely not. And we know for a fact when working with people that are crossed or in transition, once we are out of this body, do not hold that horror. We do not. We are outside of body. We are astrally out of body already. And those of you that meditate on a high scale already know you can jump out of your body and watch your body all the time. I mean, I float on my ceiling and watch myself in my healing room all the time. This is what happens. We jump out of that horror situation. And just like birth, there's probably a lot of women on here that have had a baby. We know how horrible birth can feel sometimes, how awful those contractions are, how we're screaming and we're yelling. And the second that baby's laying on me, what? Did that hurt? I mean, I kind of got a memory, but I don't really remember it. Because why? Because the joy replaces it. So please, for those of you that have had loss of a loved one or someone that you know that you have been horrified by the way that they leave, please, please, please know that their benevolence, their helpers, their angelics, their guardians, their guardian angel itself, their loved ones from beyond are there immediately to assist in that, to help not only the transition of the understanding of the consciousness, because they're still transitioning because it went too quick, but to help that pain alleviate immediately and to help transmute and transition, just like the book would do methodically. But it's done on a different timeline. So again, when we are laying in the bed, how do we feel when we die? This is why I wrote the book. Again, read it now when you're alive, because you want to get rid of the fears now so that we're not fearfully going through the process in the bed, even in a methodical hospice situation. We want to have those energies already removed from the auric field and the chakra system so that I can transmute quicker. Those that don't will struggle on an emotional and sometimes physical way on the deathbed, because we get to. And again, don't want to hear that, Suzanne. What do you mean we get to have pain? Well, we get to have pain because A, we created the pain, we housed the pain, we validated the pain, and we chose to keep the pain. So yes, we get to. So this is a self-responsibility that this book hopefully helps teach you how to have a healthy life, to have a great death. Is it different for everyone? Is death different for everyone? To some extent, I 100% believe that. Because why? Because our creational reality every day is different for everyone. There's not one single one of you on this podcast that is feeling the same thing, hearing this the same way, experiencing anything the same way. Because why? Because our creational reality comes through our consciousness container and is seen through this lens of a Suzanne Worthley paradigm. So when I die, the same situation happens in terms of my death will come through my consciousness container, how this is booted up in belief systems and perceived through this perception eyes to some extent. And I believe no matter what, we will then get to that place of omnipresence and God's source when we get back to what we would call the 0 point, meaning we just get back to the I am. And then I think a lot of those beliefs and perceptions fall by the wayside. But why this is important is if you are one that has a belief system that, oh my God, I've been so horrible, I'm going straight to hell, and the devil and so-and-so is going to be there and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you know what? You have the power to create that reality. So if you have that belief system that grandma's going to be there and my favorite dog from when I was 4 is going to be there, yeah, grandma can be there and the dog can be there. So the death process will be kind of fueled and staged out at the beginning phases of it per what your current belief systems are. So again, this is important for us to look at this book as a tool during the time period when I am alive and start to look at my belief systems. Do I really believe in shame? And have I done forgiveness? And do I have to have atonement? So all those things can be handled in this time frame on 3D realm, so that that transition then can be done again with ease, grace, and more joy. So this is important. What determines if they stay on Earth or cross over? Well, for those of you that have ever gone to the Palmer House, we teach this up at the Palmer House in Sauk Center once a year, which, by the way, we've moved to September due to the pandemic. We teach a lot about this. The difference is we cross over when all of these chakras have released gas and all of the gas tanks have dissipated or transmuted fully back to frequency. If I have some of these chakras still dribbling some fuel or hanging on to a lot of fuel, and my gas tank is still kind of there hanging on to that fuel, I would have too much density in my existence. Even though the meat bone body is gone, that consciousness density is too heavy. It can't transmute fully because it's maintaining too much frequency per whatever is holding it. Sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's confusion, etc. Per whatever is holding it will cause that density to keep it what we would call earth-bound. And so earth-bound means that that density keeps me here in 3D on the earth plane, and I do not fully transmute to what we would call spirit. So there is definitely a difference between being a spirit and being what we would call a ghost or an earth-bound. And if you need more information on that, you can come and join us at the Palmer House, because it's pretty cool and it's way different. Can you go to and from Earth whenever you want to after you die? This is the difference between the earthbound, the ghost, and the spirit. If I am omnipresent, if I am spirit, I said at the beginning here, omnipresence means I'm the I am. Omnipresence means I can be everywhere and anywhere. Omnipresence means I can go in multiple spaces and places at once because I'm simply consciousness and love. If I am a ghost or stuck in earthbound because I have fear issues that are keeping me here, I don't get to go to omnipresence. I need to do my work. And I need to do that work in terms of having a healer, having an energy person, having a crosser, having a guardian do it, et cetera. And sometimes they don't want to do the work. They just stay. But when we are omnipresent, yes, I go to and from, I am constantly moving. So good question. And it is definitely a difference between a ghost and a spirit. I had one of the coolest things happen. I had a little 80-year-old lady, and I don't think she's probably on here because she's from the UK, but maybe she'll listen to the reboot on this. Reached out, she bought my book, and her name was Margaret, and she said, I'm 80 years old now, and she had a question that I'm going to read it how she said it. This question has arisen within my inner searching recently because of a discovery of a dead torso in our area at her home. The guilty are now under arrest, but murder, violent death, whether intentional or by accident, are all too familiar, and I would like to consider and know more about the consequences and the outcomes. And so I thought this was a very interesting one because we talked just a minute ago about if something was horrific that we do get the help. But I think it was really interesting about the consequences and what happens. And we really have a lot of elements here. Many of the elements of this answer are all over the board in terms of all kinds of things, because we need to understand that the benevolence will come rushing in sometimes when that horror thing happens, like I just explained. They can come rushing in to assist that in a violent way. They can take that and transition that person in an instant. They can work on it for a long time. Maybe it takes months, maybe it takes years. So there's timelines that are all across the board, depending on the belief systems of the person that actually got killed and how that works with their benevolence. So it's all over the board as far as that goes. But as far as what happened to the one causing the death, the actual murderer, this is what she was more curious about. When they die, it is to be determined by their benevolence as to what happens to them, because for all we know, the interaction is all about a karmic resolution and was maybe possibly part of their soul record and their co-contract. And this is going to be really hard for some people, but I'm going to keep saying it. We make contracts. We make soul contracts. I write about it in the book. I help you understand that we have contractual co-contracts per our karmic soul return. Sometimes I take on the horrific act of being the horrible one, the murderer, the killer, the nasty, horrible one. And we think they automatically are doomed to hell and forever after. They're the awful, awful, awful. But remember, God is not a guy, and there is no judging of a God guy on a cloud that says, you're bad, you're going down there. This is our co-contractual agreement with the God source to say, I came down here as possibly a karmic return. For all we know, excuse me, that one that actually created the horrific act came down here to fulfill a karmic return with the one who was killed. We don't know if there's a return on karma. I killed you, now you kill me. We don't know, and it's none of our business, to be honest. It's none of us to judge, and we judge all the time. We think the people that are the horrific people should go straight to hell and not even have love. And in my opinion, we do not condone the act. Do not misunderstand my words here. We don't need to condone the act on a third level, on a 3D level. There's nothing that condones abuse, horror, nothing. But on a soul level, this is where we find atonement and openness to allow the universal laws to do the work, to step back from judgment and be the observer and let the God source, not a guy, know that maybe they came down here to do this horrific act to forever change not only that contract and that person, but maybe humanity as a whole. For example, when we have a 9/11, no one can get around the fact that those people would never sign up to die. And I would argue, yes, they would, because they have forever, as a unified force, changed how we look at things. They have forever changed what we think about safe. They have changed forever how we think about healing. They have changed forever as a unified force. Many, many, many things, in addition to individualized soul contracts with those that they lost and loved. So we need to understand that even in these horrific situations, shooters, killers, all of those kinds of things, whatever happens is happening from a soul standpoint in alignment with whatever that soul came here to do. And we don't have any right to understand that, nor judge that, or even get into that, because it's not ours to do. We can hold space for what we call a karmic return in the way of universal law, meaning pray for the law of karmic return, pray for the law of cause and effect, Pray for whatever needs to happen on that soul level to happen to wipe out the karma so that everybody wins in the long run. So there may be very good reasons that people take these situations, and it can help us release really horrific sadness in mass ways when we have like a huge shooting or even a horrific one-on-one. We can learn to atone and forgive on a soul level and find peace in our heart. Again, this does not condone the behavior on the third dimensional level. I'm not saying, hey, it's okay. They came down to kill somebody. That is not even close to what I'm saying. So be very, very clear. This is a contractual soul level area that I am talking about. And we need to understand also, if we choose, that this karmic return crap is not what we came here to do originally. We keep creating karma because we can't seem to forgive and move forward in love. So the more work that we do, again, on this earth plane, finding forgiveness and kindness and working in love versus retribution, judgment, and resentment, and I want to get you back, we can stop this ridiculous karmic wheel that is out of control. So I hope that that kind of explains that one. I thought it was a phenomenal question and really pretty deep, and really interesting that it came from an 80-year-old. Alrighty, this is a neat one. My only fear about death is that if I die in a traumatic or gruesome way, that I will be in my body during that pain and trauma. Would you be pulled out before anything completely painful happens? So we already covered this to some extent. To some extent, when I am engaged in that physical meat body, yes, I am experiencing some things, but back to that childbirth analogy, I'm in transition. I go through the process of healing. Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes not. Now, back to the ghost versus spirit, if I have had a horrific trauma and I can't get past that and I don't accept the benevolent help, I may indeed choose, because I'm angry, I'm resentful, I'm judging, I want retribution. I may choose to stay here on that earth plane as a what we call ghost again, because I haven't allowed myself the assistance to transmute. So these are all different decisions. And again, we are in charge of our death process just as much as we are in charge of this life process. So it's important to look at this book from all sides. Got another one from Cindy. When you talked about a miscarriage, soul at times coming back when the time is right as another baby or a relative, what are your thoughts on deceased children coming back as another child in the family, even a child who may pass on as a teenager? So this is also very interesting to me, and there's no right or wrong. There's no ones or twos on this. There's a myriad of things that happen. So when we die and we miscarry a baby, there's a lot of reasons we miscarry. And I get this question a lot. Why would my baby choose to miscarry? Quite simply this: the baby may have just chose to come in and have the experience of being in utero for a short amount of time, period. Now that to our logical head down here on earth plane does not make sense, but to the incarnation, it may make sense. That may make sense because maybe it missed something in another incarnation, or has to finish something, or didn't know something. Whatever reason it makes sense to that incoming soul is what that incoming soul will have happen in terms of a miscarriage. It may also, in transition of becoming an actual baby, when that soul drops in, it may say, wait a minute, I want to change this timeline. I want to change this situation. I want to change something about my contract, and therefore I choose to step out of that miscarriage, which comes out as a miscarriage. I choose to step out of that contract. Another reason, I may actually co-contract with these parents to actually suffer a miscarriage. Now, again, why would I do that? Well, there's reasons we do that. And there's all kinds of situations that I've worked with people that have miscarried and they don't understand why. And I say, because from the soul's perspective, your body needed to have that experience, good, bad, or ugly. And sometimes that experience is to know separation, to find faith, to know that I can trust my body, to heal my body that I couldn't trust the body, and on and on and on these lessons go. So again, it's important to honor the actual contract of leaving, even when it's something as sad as a miscarriage. So now, does a miscarriage, Cindy's question, come back as another incarnation? Do I miscarry to come back into another situation as a child within the same family, or in thereof a surrounding family member? Sometimes, in my opinion, we don't necessarily always fully reincarnate into another being. We shard incarnate. We actually have shards of our oversoul when we incarnate again and again. So oftentimes we'll go, I swear that kid, it's just like grandpa. Or I swear that kid's just like Uncle Joe. Why? Because Uncle Joe may have a shard in this new experience. It's not necessarily 100% of a reincarnation, but sometimes it could be. But most of the time, in my opinion, it has shards of reincarnations. So can that happen within families? Can it come in later? Yes. Can it drop in even later in terms of a partial drop in to a child that's already a teenager? Yeah. Or could a teenager that dies come back as a child? Sure. We don't have there. This isn't the same playing field as we have down here in 3D, because we think very linearly in time, exit, enter, et cetera, et cetera. And remember, we're in an omnipresence situation where there isn't any time. And if we're shards upon shards, there's all kinds of amazing things that can happen. So why worry about it? I think enjoy it. If there's a shard of Uncle Joe in there and you like Uncle Joe, I think that's a fascinating and fabulous thing. And I think it's a joy factor. And in my opinion, we should get excited about those things and not worry about having the actual answer. Belief, faith, fun, all that stuff's a part of it. She also asked, what is your opinion on when a person gets stuck and can't pass or cross over? Are they stuck at the 9th level or somewhere else? So this particular gal is does a lot more work. I don't know, Cindy, if you're on here, in terms of the actual levels or planes of existence. And I don't necessarily think that it has to do with the actual level or plane where we get stuck. I think it more has to do with our knowledge. It has to do with what we are dealing with in terms of letting go of things. The 9th level in the book is absolutely ease and grace. There is no really stuck at that point. In my opinion, when we're stuck from crossing over, it's way down in these particular areas in terms of if I'm still having difficulties in my egoic or my relationship or my belief systems, these are the places where I maybe have lost the meat body. I'm not technically a ghost, but I got a lot of work to do. So I'm still in transition and getting that help in understanding my contract. And usually, in my opinion, these are in the more egoic chakra consciousness gasoline, and not necessarily the higher ones like the 9th dimension. So that's kind of a technical answer for somebody that's really learning the different planes of existence. This one is a little more complicated, she says. I'm going to keep going. I'm getting close to 8, but I'm going to go through these because I'm going to try to finish these and honor these people. Again, if you choose to stay on, great. This one is a little more complicated, it says, at least to me. If our energy or our soul continues to visit people in our past lives, does our current incarnation experience those visiting, or does one stop past visiting when in a meat body? So that's a lot. That's a lot. So she's talking about timelines, okay? So if our energy or our soul continues to visit people in our past lives, does our current incarnation experience those visiting, or does one stop past life visiting when in a meat body? And I said, I think I'm understanding this question, but you will have to decide. When our current incarnation connects with either past or future lives, this meat body can indeed learn from that, visit that, connect with that, plus revisit or ignite the actual energy, including health issues or pain from that. It also learns knowledge and insight. So yes, the meat body is experiencing it. And, you know, the better that you get at traversing timelines and understanding things, I, in very many cases, have gone to my future life. And it's so weird because when I'm in my future life in an astral body, it's actually a past life to that future life. I'm no longer a Suzanne because I'm a future incarnation of my soul. But when I come to it with an astral of Suzanne, I'm actually a past life. So it's fascinating to me because this meat body here, waiting for my soul to drop back in after that meditation, can learn from all of those realms. So this is what's so fascinating about dying, because we're everywhere. But we're also everywhere if we're living, if we allow ourselves to learn how to do this process and trust in the fact that it's all okay and that I do have these skills. So it's really pretty cool that we can do most of this stuff. What about for loved ones who are supporting? Is there a stage for them that is usually most challenging to work through? This was a really good question, and I talk very specifically in the book about what loved ones can do to caregive or support or help this process. So for the answer on this one, I said the one where the solar plexus is shutting down because of the modeling. This is a process that happens when we die in the solar plexus or the third plane. And I explain this thoroughly in the book. Modeling means when that auric field, that chakra is losing gas in the ego, the mental plane, the actual auric field looks like stringy lights of white and yellow. And they're kind of thin and wiggly lights like this. When that is transmuting back to source, it reverses the look on the actual meat body. It reverses the look as it's actually transmuting and leaving. And to me, this is fascinating. So on the meat body during this process, it looks like all of a sudden black lines and black icky stuff is happening. And this scares a lot of people. It's called modeling. And when you are in the process of hospice or in the hospital, they'll say, oh, this is the modeling process. This is okay. This is part of the process. I want you to even understand it's way cooler than that. What that means is actually you are witnessing the actual reverse, like a reverse negative of a photograph. You are watching in meat body the dissipating energy field of that auric field. To me, that's fascinating. But again, who tells us this? So if I'm sitting at bedside, that's terrifying. My loved one looks like they're all getting black, icky stuff. So understand from the process of this book that this is a beautiful, actual beautiful transition. The other one I wrote about that's very hard to co-care or co-give or sit vigil of is the throat chakra. This is the one where oftentimes if I'm dying methodically again, if I'm starting to really go down and I'm being almost comatose, semi there, sometimes I find my loved one popping up and they're all of a sudden starting to talk. And I, as the co-giver, am getting very nervous and scared because grandpa can't talk. I don't know what you're saying. Oh my God, what can I do? What do you need to say? And they're grasping and they're articulating only, or they're looking and they're searching and they're pointing and they're trying to talk. And I am so frustrated because I can't help you because I don't know what you're saying. The book teaches you. It is not your job. You don't need to know what they're saying because they're not saying anything for you at this point. They're saying it for them. They are shutting down the throat chakra. They no longer need to articulate words like you are hearing me speak. They are understanding that the chakra gasoline is shutting down, and they are recognizing that I'm actually talking to my spouse in the corner that died 10 years prior because now I'm actually talking with my heart. I'm actually talking with my telepathy. I'm actually needing no words to be able to articulate how much I'm seeing things in the room. But if we don't know this, this is so frustrating for the ones that are at bedside. We can get angst filled. We can get griefed. We can be so upset later because I couldn't figure out what he or she had to say. And I am here to tell you, read the book in that chapter over and over again and understand it is not yours to know. There is probably most of the time not a whole lot you need to say. And if you need to say it and you can't get an answer, say it with your head and your heart because they can hear you that way. And they may need to or choose to articulate, I love you, or I want to say goodbye, or I may articulate something of worth if you want to put those words on it. And so, yes, that can happen. But most of the time, this is a transition of the throat chakra moving to a place of using heartfelt energy and telepathy versus the verbal strings coming out of my mouth. So a very, very confusing time for many in the sense of caregiving and hospice holding. Okay, how can people support dying loved ones while on quarantine? This is interesting because we've got this COVID thing going. If people are not allowed to be with the loved ones in a hospital room or at home, how can they assist their dying loved ones and how can they cope with the guilt of not being there? This is exactly why I wrote the book. This is no different than me being in Texas and my grandma is dying in Minnesota. This is no different, quarantine or no quarantine, because oftentimes we can't get there. I might just step out to the bathroom and they die. I might go to work and then I feel guilty. So all of this guilt and all of this stuff I write explicitly in the book about because this is energy that is wasted. We are very clear when we are dying, how we die in the long run from a higher perspective, who is in the room or not when we die. And this is not a value system. If I want to be there and I didn't get there and, oh my God, I should have been there. That's about me. That is not about the dying person. The dying person will die with help, benevolence, assistance, guardians, all kinds of help. And if you're not there, please read the book and understand they have faith in terms of they are being helped. They do not die alone. Nobody in quarantine dies alone. Nobody dies alone, period. Nobody dies alone. We are absolutely 100% guided in every day of our life walking around alive. So why would we not be guided when we're dead? So this is a really big waste of guilt energy, shame energy that is not needed in people's lives if they would understand this concept. So if you can't get there, again, telepathy, heartfelt, prayer. I give specifics in the book on how to hold space for this kinds of things, because this is important for us to know. This is not about me getting there. This is about allowing them to be able to transmute and having the faith that I am there. And I write in the book about what we call flybys. I write in the book about that feeling that I get, that I just sort of knew that grandma died, and here I am 5 states away, and it was so weird. I swear I knew it. And then I got the call. Well, that's because grandma actually flew by. Yeah, grandma can fly by when she's back in that omnipresence. She can be at all the grandkids' houses at the same time because she doesn't have the body to keep her in one space. So they are very well aware of where you are. And if you are open to it, you oftentimes will have these amazing situations where we are feeling the presence of our loved ones. So this can happen, again, in any way, shape, or form throughout our lives. We can connect to our loved ones by prayer, intention, in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be a death process. This is why it's important for us to allow people to have lives. I don't need to be in your business and in your face every day, all day, worrying about you. I can learn to release you and have faith that your higher self is in charge, and I can work this way. So this is a really good lesson for a lot of us, even when we're alive. Okay, so this is a really common cluster of questions that I get because there's so many people dealing with Alzheimer's, dementia, and I learned a new word when this question was given, sundowners. I didn't even know the word. I had to actually look it up. So the question was, what is a person experiencing when they have sundowners, and then it said Alzheimer's in quotes, at age 96? And I think it's really an interesting concept because there's many, many, many of us that are struggling right now, especially with this COVID situation, that we can't get to our loved ones that are in Alzheimer's home, memory care, nursing homes, et cetera, et cetera. And whether we can or can't get to them, this actual scenario doesn't really change a whole lot. So it's important, in my opinion, that you go to the case study that is in the book that directly relates to this, because there is an actual case study of a hospice patient that I learned direct one-on-one, straight from source, right from his heart, what happens during Alzheimer's. And this is years ago, and I've been working with it ever since. And I truly believe this. And again, take what resonates. When I was meeting with this gentleman in hospice, and it's a great story, it's all laid out in the book, he actually was non-responsive. He had never articulated for years. He was basically a lump in his chair and did not have any interaction with anybody. And I went into the hospice situation along with somebody else. He wasn't a patient of mine. And because he wasn't actively dying, I only did actively dying patients. So I was kind of sitting on the sidelines and I was watching her, and I tapped into him telepathically. And I asked him a couple of questions because he had these really cool Zen books on his bookshelf. And I'm like, so you know a lot about Zen stuff. And I hear in my head, wait a minute, what? And I said, what? And he said, can you hear me? And I said, well, I can hear you. Can you hear me? And he's like, well, how can you hear me? And I go, well, how can you hear me? And it was this dialogue of absolute banter. And you had no idea I was doing it because it was all in here. And my coworker didn't even know I was doing it. And this banter went on back and forth. And I was kind of giving this guy kind of some crap. I thought it was kind of funny after a while. And he was kind of getting a kick out of it. And at one point, he had a lot of drool on his bib because, again, he was very, very out of his body. And I said to him, hey, I bet you were pretty hot back before you didn't have a haircut and the bib thing. And he, out loud, true story, burst out laughing in verbal out loud, and his body jumped out of his chair and he looked right at me and he went, ah, ha, 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 ha. Coworker almost crapped her pants. She didn't know what happened because this was all done telepathically. And it was an amazing validation that he could hear absolutely everything. And then the dialogue became serious. I said, okay, now that I've got you and you've got me and we're clear, an open channel, what the heck is going on here? What is Alzheimer's? What is happening? What are you doing? And he very clearly stated to me, and I believe this with all my heart, that Alzheimer's patients, dementia patients, and now I know the sundowners word, another kind of level of it, They are literally in and out of body. They are learning astral projection. They are going to spaces and places and already deciding what they're doing in between lives. They are already working and atoning and checking out new lives, other planetary systems, other incarnations, pasts and futures. They are already learning what they're doing in between lives. And it is fascinating to me because we are so incredibly scared when my person is dying. We are sad because my mother or my father is not in there. And I am here to tell you they are in there. And yes, they can hear you. So be aware of that and very clear that they can hear you. And when they come back into their body, we get even more sad because we think that they're sad and frustrated. And they're not sad and frustrated. They're just popping back in. So I said to this gentleman, well, why do you keep popping back in if it's so free out there? Why do you want to stay in this broken down body? Why do you want to keep popping back in? Why don't you just go? Why don't you just go further and be free? And he looked at me very clearly, and now we were eye to eye, and he said, I am not done holding the light. Oh my God. I was like, oh my God. Oh my God, how could I have not known that? How ignorant are we that each of us beings, when we are connected people, we are holding God's light. We are holding a shard of God. We are holding a shard of God light on this planet. We are like a pin dot. And forever since I heard that, I look up at the stars when I'm up north and I think in a reverse way, I wonder how many of those are actually souls. I wonder if those are actually light holding elsewhere. I wonder how much that star system is actually the reverse of me being down here. It's a fascinating concept that we hold God light down here in a grid pattern until it is time for that light to go. And whatever job he's still doing by holding that light, whether it's somebody still learning how to grieve, whether it's somebody learning how to come back and forth and not feel guilty because they can't get to the Alzheimer's ward during COVID, whatever those lessons are, he's still holding the light for not only his lessons, but everyone's. And so it's a fascinating case study. And I really encourage anybody that is dealing with dementia in any way, shape, or form, read that story because it is one of the most incredible knowingness that you can now never have to, again, worry that I didn't get to go see mom, or she's so sad, or she's so frustrated because she's in that icky body, because they're not. So I thought that that was a really cool question. So I hope that that answers that because it's really important. Next one is, are there certain signs we should look for to know if someone is close to dying? And I think this is really kind of interesting because it depends on the death. It depends on what's happening. If we are in a situation where we are doing a home death or a hospice death, they will organically, most likely, go to a space and a place where they will become what we call non-responsive. And this is the space and place that I came in as a hospice worker because of my skills of telepathy. I came in and worked with someone that had no capacity to speak like this or communicate because that's what I chose to do because I have the skill that I can communicate and I can communicate. So when we see them starting to shut down the body and get non-responsive, this is usually an indicator of the progress of moving forward. And again, the timeline is all dependent upon these belief systems. This book is so important to understand. You can read chapter by chapter and you can actually watch the processes and see where they are close and not close to dying. And we don't always work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in that order. We can jump from 1 to 3 and then back to 2 and I can jump. So it isn't always completely in order. I just want to make that clear. So sometimes we can sort of kind of get rid of some of the sacral and I still got some relationship stuff to do. And man, boy, if it's stuck in my throat still because I didn't communicate in that relationship, I might be playing those 2 chakras. So there isn't an absolute answer to that question. But I think reading the book and looking at all of the actual bullet points on what to look for in terms of actual physicality and emotion and physical reaction, I think that will really help anyone in that situation. So does Alzheimer's, again, affect the soul and its transition? And if so, how? Well, now when you know my story that I just said, I think you got your own answer on that. It doesn't affect the soul at all. The soul's working like crazy during Alzheimer's. The soul is actually out there having fascinating and wonderful experiences. And so this is important for us to know that they are following their contract, that they are out there looking and determining and deciding, and they are in charge of their timeline. So how do you connect and converse with loved ones who have transitioned? I think that this question was about me, but I'm going to answer it twofold. When I talk to them and converse with them who have transitioned, like I said, I use my psychic skills of audience, sentient, voyant, cognitive, all of those things. I use those psychic skills. That's how I talk to not only dead people, but I talk to actually your body when I work with you. I'm working remotely right now. I use all of those psychic skills with people that are alive that I'm just working on in terms of healing. So these skills are really something that are a birthright for all of us. And I do encourage people to know that you have these skills. Maybe they're dormant, maybe they're not active, maybe you don't have a huge amount of them, but we all got something. And so I think this is an important part of, again, the book, to understand that these skills are real and that we can converse with our loved ones in a numerous amount of ways. Beyond that, though, fake it till you make it, because we oftentimes, when I have people lose somebody, they want to know they're okay, like that first question. And then they think that they're making things up. If I see that bird and I kind of think it's my grandma, I think I'm making that up because that's stupid. It's a bird. It's not my grandma. I always say fake it till you make it, because how do you know that's not your grandma? How do you know that essence didn't drop into that bird? Because if there's a knowingness, it's not grandma turned into a bird. It's the essence surrounds that bird and it gets your attention, and grandma throws you a little love bubble via the bird. So fake it till I make it is really important, because what that does is it opens up childlike imagination and creativity for us to then embrace the concept of someone coming forward. And I think that oftentimes we get so scared because we think we lost somebody when their meat is gone. And I am not by any means discounting the sadness that we don't have meat and bone to hug or converse with, but do not fool yourself. You can ask for a cosmic hug. That's why I sign everything Cosmic Hugs. You can get a cosmic hug in any way, shape, or form if you allow yourself. And sometimes we can physically feel that. Sometimes we can physically feel that loved one get into the actual bed. Does that have to be a creepy ghost thing? No. It's a flyby scenario of the energy template that reminds me, yep, that's what that feels like, and that's a gift. If my loved one doesn't do that, does that mean I'm bad and I'm broken, or they're hurt and they're not transitioned? None of that is that. What that means is they may be busy, they may be learning, they may be transitioning, or you may be too busy to have missed that breeze that went through your hair. You maybe have been too busy to see the bird that was the essence, and so forth. So these are ongoing trial and errors that we want to maybe play with and have fun with and joyfully experience versus trying so hard to communicate. So I think that it's supposed to be joyful and not fearful when I allow my loved one to come forward. It's supposed to be, I lost my dad. He didn't get to walk me down the aisle. Hell no, he's right there walking down the aisle. And if you're commanding that, he's there. If you're wanting that, of course he's there. If you allow your body to feel it, you may even know he's there because you get to, and he gets to. And so this is important for us because usually it is us that is the barrier to the communication because they are simply omnipresent. So I hope that makes some sense. And again, play. And lastly, I think near-death experiences are interesting when people die and come right back. That's kind of a cool way to end it in terms of these questions for today, because a lot of times what a near-death experience is I'm starting to transition and I'm going through these processes. And these are starting to shut down to some extent, but I'm still in this so-called silver cord. I'm still in this tube to my higher self. And as I'm traversing and I'm going through this tube to my higher self, I am seeing my book of life. I am experiencing the real of my death. I am seeing everything good, bad, and ugly that I experienced or didn't do yet. And this is when the near-death experience makes a decision that says, oops, this thing is still on my list and I didn't do it. And I prefer and choose to do it on earth plane versus choosing to do it on the other side of the veil. So this is an important one. And I really want people to understand that near-death experience is very, it's actually in the structure of the chakra system and the auric fields and the death process that we write about in the book. So this is very important. I do want to add one last thing in, if we can hang in there for 1 second, because this is a tough one. And we didn't necessarily talk about suicide. And I want to very briefly say, I talk about different things in the book. The book has very many different aspects to it. I do an actual introduction. I talk about my life a little bit and why, how I came to do this, being that mortician's daughter. I talk about life force energy as a whole. This book in and of itself is a chakra book, and it teaches you the consciousness levels. You don't even need another chakra book or training. That's part of the book. So again, it doesn't have to be about death. It can be about life. It talks about Akashic records. It talks about soul contracts. These are hugely important, not only in death, but in life. And then it breaks out what we call the 9 stages of death. And then it talks very distinctly at the end in some appendixes about things that are different. It talks about ritual. It talks about grief. It talks about goodbyes and celebrations. It does talk about miscarriages, and it talks about suicide, and it talks about animals, because animals are not that much different than the humans. So all of that is in the book. But I want to make reference to 2 things. As a healer, the scariest things that people are so upset and fear-filled about when they're in the death process is having made the decision to have an abortion, and the guilt, because it's been presented to them as a belief system and they've believed in it, will be killing them their entire life. And I am here to say, if that was your choice, and there is no judgment from me ever as an energy healer, because every single time that I have been astounded when a baby comes in, and I know for a fact that it was an aborted baby, the healing that happens for that person on the table, when I tell them that their aborted baby is fine, and it is there, and it will be there when they die, and it is in that realm of the in-betweens, and it has still an existence, and it is there to support you. There is no guilt from that child. There's no anger. There's no nothing. There is absolute love. This is an important, I don't care what your belief systems are on it. I will stand firm on this as an energy healer, that this is something that is a personal choice. Nobody has any right to that choice, but I'm here as a person that talks to the dead to tell you they're fine, and they've always been fine. So you need to understand to be fine, because that being has either incarnated, they've gone forward, or they're waiting for you. So please, please find some joy in that. And then when it comes to suicide, almost the same story. Suicide, for so many reasons, has got such a bad rap in terms of we take on such a cultural belief system and we attach so much negativity to this. And there are very many people choosing to leave planet right now, and many, many, many are choosing to do suicide. Now, I do not want to confuse something, however. Suicide is not an answer, and I'm going to show you something in terms of this drawing again, because this is really, really important. In terms of, I had a client one time say, I am so just tired. I'm tired because my entire family's dead. Everybody's gone. I miss them all so much. I just want to be with them. I want to leave. I want to kill myself, and I just want to be with them. And I said to this gentleman, be very clear, you will not be with them. They may be there at your actual death if you choose suicide, but you will not be with them. And why will I not be with them? It's this. If I came in and I'm a person that has that oversoul, and that oversoul has lesson plan of to learn this, 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 and this, and that I'm supposed to learn this much before I so-called die, okay? These are the lessons that this body is going to learn before I die and go back to source energy. It's my plan. It's my book of life, my Akashic record. If I jump that lesson system because I don't want to be here anymore for whatever reason, and I maybe did this and this and this and this, but now I leave planet and I have all of this left and I feel it's just too much. I can't take the pain. I'm here to tell you, the meat body will die. You will cross over. You will go across, but you will still learn this. And you will not be necessarily a ghost, for example, although you could, depending on how the death is and how you handle that chakra system. But even if you cross, you still will be in what we would call a rehab situation or a learning situation. You still will be at a density and a situation in terms of in between lives where I am still going through the process of everything I came in to learn. And I won't necessarily have to come back as an incarnation and a karmic return. I am actually stuck in a density that is, yes, I'm crossed. Yes, I'm with others that are dead. But my loved ones who have done their work and have been in benevolence are floating at this level. The density difference doesn't have me hanging out with who I thought I was going to hang out with because I've still got work to do. And this is really important to understand that suicide does not get me out of my work. Suicide does not get me directly back with who I'm missing. So it's very, very, very clear to me that it's almost easier to do this work in meat body form because we can move through this quicker here, even though it feels like pain, and we can wipe that karma out for good. And I don't have to come back and do anything. And I don't have to do it in between lives. I slide straight over. So then I am with my loved ones. So that's a little tidbit on suicide. Now, there are those suicides, however, that have not necessarily, they've gone through this to some extent, and they still choose to up that contract. They choose to take their own life. So there are suicides that, in my opinion, that I've worked with, do cross over and don't have a huge amount of work to do because it's how they chose to not only live, but how they chose to die and do the work in the death. So there's all different scenarios. There's not a right there. There's not a 1, 2, 3, 4 on this. There's not a this, that, or right or wrong. There's so many variables on this. But I want you to understand that even in suicide, you are still taken care of. And everybody thinks because someone killed themselves or took their own lives that they are at this horrible, horrible place. Even when they're in this rehab business, they are still working with benevolent help. They still have guardians. They still have those light beings that are there for their highest and best good. But are they absolutely just, like we think, jumping on rainbows? No, they're working. And so what do we want to do about that? We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to make it harder. We want to heal us, because if we heal us, we hold a vibration of releasing them. We hold a vibration of giving them the gift of, I love you enough to let you do your work. I'm not going to hold on to guilt. I should have been there. I could have called her. I didn't drive over in time. I knew he had the gun. All of those dumb things that we hang on to do not help them do this work. So in any suicide where there's a situation where I'm holding grief, angst, anger, guilt, all of that fear that we hang on to the one left behind, I'm here to tell you, do your own work. Because if you do your own work on releasing that and releasing that guilt, they then have more ammunition and no cords attached to them, attached to you, that are depleting that energy field. And you will live a more clear and healthy life also, and not dis-ease your chakra system and move into a state of disease. So these are really, really important things to understand when it comes to suicides. And I want to also very much end with the suicide doesn't necessarily be a great, beautiful, wonderful thing either. It's not a happy thing, but we can find happiness, and we can understand that sometimes that is their way out. Sometimes we can find that honor again. We can honor the fact that their version, their vision, their choice, the way that they looked at this was their way out. And we need to understand that over here on the side of the veil will work out the way that it needs to. So honor is very, very important, even and especially with this particular element of death, in my opinion, because I have worked with many suicides. I've cleared many houses. I've crossed many, many people. And a lot of suicide people do not cross because of the belief system that they're going to hell. So be very clear if you have children or yourself, and if you are teaching a belief system about you're bad, you're going to hell, that does not behoove anything and anybody, because that is simply not the case. There isn't a place. Hell is basically going through the process of pain and angst. And we're in hell every day on this earth plane. And we're still in hell when we're not understanding. Part of the reason I wrote the book is to understand forgiveness, understand compassion, understand the opportunity of taking responsibility for not only your life, but your death. So I hope that this is helpful. And I encourage, if anybody does have further questions, we will do a follow-up and say, hey, because I'm sure that I don't know if this prompted more. I don't know if people want to know in between lives. I don't know if people want to know other realms. I don't know if people want to know more about Akashic records and soul contracts. I don't know. I'm making a commitment right here and now and online to please speak out, because I'm making the commitment to be there to answer the questions as best I possibly can. I have been very honored and fortunate to be able to talk to all sides of the veil. I have been very blessed and honored to be at bedside for many, 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 many deaths. And I will continue to share what I know from how I know it, not claiming I am the only truth, But please, if this is important to us, let's keep the dialogue going, because my ultimate goal is to change this death culture, overall. And again, I think it's so bizarre that we're trying to launch a book during a pandemic, but this is the best time to start talking about death. This is the best time to start getting all of this fear out of us, because everybody's fear barometer is up and over the roof right now because we're scared to death about dying. So this is the time to talk about it. So if this is something we all want more of, please reach out, and Kelsey and I will do our best in any way, shape, or form to be there for you. And until then, I hope this helps. And you can always find the book online. I appreciate the sales. I appreciate you sharing it. And I appreciate you being here tonight. So until next, cosmic hugs.